Okay, everyone, good morning. Welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Friday, August 16th. Myself and Chris Jack here. A couple of weeks left to go in the transfer window, Chris. Rangers playing St Johnstone tomorrow. Not a whole lot to talk about this morning, but I am sure we will make it through with the help of our viewers as ever. First off, how you doing? And tomorrow, you'd have maybe hoped that this game against St Johnstone would be a 12:15 kickoff, but in fact, it is a 5:45 kickoff.
5 on a Saturday. It's not the dream kickoff time. It has to be said, and especially given the way that things have unfolded over the last few days, over the last few weeks, I don't think there's much enthusiasm amongst the fans ahead of this one. Really interesting to see.
I think we've lost Chris Jack this morning, so hope everyone can still hear me. If having some slight technical issues, do let me know if you can still hear me in the comments. But I think as Chris was going, there he is. He's back now. I was just saving face for you momentarily, Chris. You were just complaining about the kickoff time. Jan says another morning, another Rangers farce. Hopefully, you don't mean us, Jan, but no offence taken if that is the case. But Chris, you were getting into the swing of saying that, listen, Rangers have 2 weeks to go in the win. Yes, yeah. Momentum was taken out from under your feet, a bit like a soft red card at the start of the second half. But listen, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the latest rumours, Chris, today, as ever. We're going to try and build up to tomorrow's game against St Johnstone. But I guess the overall tone is much like at the start of the week. The Rangers could do with something to lift the mood, whether that be a sign-in or a good first half and second half tomorrow instead of just one of them. Let's start on transfer rumours. Not too much kicking about. The latest piece of news to come out last night, I think it was out of Football Scotland, was suggesting that Rabbi Matondo was a subject of interest from Leeds United. Now, as we understand it, Rabbi Matondo is obviously someone who, if the club could get the right amount of money for, they would sell. That's not exclusive to just Rabbi Matondo. Came to the club this would be his third season, came to the club in 2022. I think he's always struggled to adapt to a high possession style of football. Everyone knows his pace, everyone knows what he can bring when he's playing in a game that's got a lot of transition moments, Chris, but he's also not a winger that's played that consistently for Rangers. When he has had the opportunity to do so, and that did arise under Clement at the start of this year when he was actually in pretty good form for a few games, injuries has kind of crept up on him. He's had this persisting knee injury throughout his whole career. So while it's still to materialise the validity of this interest from Leeds, Chris, or anyone else, Matondo is another player that he's on heavy wages comparatively at Rangers. If they could get those wages off the books, if they could get a good price for him, they'd like to reinvest that money elsewhere. But as with the entirety of Rangers' summer business, and I think as exacerbated by not making the Champions League playoff, you need the money there. You need the players out before you can bring in too many more players. But Matondo is someone who certainly has the wages of a player who should be contributing fairly frequently. And if you look at how Clement has made his picks on the left side of the team recently, that would suggest that he's not someone who's at the forefront of his plans right at this moment in time.
I think you've summed it up there, Josh. I think the lack of football that he has had probably tells you that he's not one of the main options for Clement. And as you said right at the start there, he doesn't suit Rangers style-wise. His attributes don't really fit into the style of football that Rangers not just play under Clement, under previous managers. They don't have the space domestically for Rabbi Matondo to use his main attribute, which is his pace. He's not good enough in those tighter areas when teams are sitting further back. He's not able to get himself out of those areas. There has been moments, the Old Firm goal, obviously, European goal at the start of last season as well. But these moments are far, for someone who Rangers do have a lot of money tied up in. Those moments are far too fleeting. There's not been enough of a return on Matondo. And I'm not sure there was ever really going to be when you look at what he can actually do, what he's actually good at. Remember when he first when he first came into the club. One of the press guys that I know spoke to someone out in Belgium about him, and he said, look, that purple patch that he had over there, it was excellent, but he was playing in a side who were able to use that pace. If you give him half the pitch to run into, he'll beat anyone. He can get in behind. He can be dangerous. But word came back right at the very start of Rabbi Matondo's Rangers career. If you're looking to play, as Rangers have to, against teams that have got a lower block, that are going to make life difficult for you, you're not going to get the best out of them. And I think the two seasons and 3 weeks or so that we've had sums that up. He's just not suited to the style of football that no matter who the Rangers manager is, opposition teams will set up in a familiar way, and Matondo just doesn't have the quality in those tighter areas to make a real impact for the type of money that he's on, type of money that he's cost. He is one that is dispensable. I feel like he is one that Rangers have to move on over the next couple of weeks. And as you said there, that money can be used, or hopefully can be used in a far more productive manner.
Yeah, if you think back, he was at Cercle Bruges in the Belgian top flight, Chris, and their team's quite known for their counter pressing and playing aggressive, fast football, but so much more space. And if you think back to when Matondo actually came into the club, more often than not, yes, there was perhaps a slight succession plan with Ryan Kent on the left-hand side, but more often than not, under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, he was kind of trialled on the right-hand side, and it just never felt a natural fit whatsoever. And if you think of the flashes that we have seen of him in a Rangers jersey, it's been that goal against PSV. This time last year, he was quite a productive substitute, but it's always been into space. And again, that's probably a player that you could use with having in your squad, someone who can just kill games off or can be a threat for opponents when maybe there's only a 1-goal deficit, like the weekend against Motherwell, but not when you're on such significant wages in comparison to the rest of the squad. But I guess listen, Chris, we could be having this conversation with a lot of players, and that is a difficulty that Clement now has. He's as well as he has said effectively that Champions League money would have sped up the process of what Rangers are trying to do with this summer rebuild. And with 2 weeks to go, I know you and Stevie touched on this yesterday and had a little bit of a look at the squad depth chart. There is a lot of positions. There's not many positions you look at where you think Rangers couldn't improve at the moment, and that is it's not a great position to be in 2 weeks before the window closes. And they do still need, I don't know how many starters you think Rangers need, but as I've said there, I don't think there's many positions that they couldn't justify going out and buying a starter, if you know what I mean.
I think the goalkeeper, and that's it at present.
Yeah.
I don't think they would be able to go into the market unless an offer came in for Jack Butland that was huge. But even if it was, they're then not going to reinvest all of that money back into the one position. I don't think they would be able to go out and get a better keeper than Butland. The rest of the squad, it's open to improvement. Even the players that have come in that we think should be starters. Also spoke a lot about Robin Proper over the last couple of weeks. He should be a starter. He should improve. Czerny, I think we all like and we're all encouraged by. So that's maybe one you say, well, Rangers will do well to improve on that right hand side because Czerny is the improvement. Apart from that, there's scope for improvement in every area of this team at present, and that's not just a starting 11 improvement; it's a squad depth improvement. Myself and Steve spoke about that yesterday. I wrote a piece for the website yesterday looking at the squad depth, and the squad's just not there. It's not a starting 11 that wins you titles, that takes you an extended cup runs, that takes you into latter stages of Europe. It's a squad, and Rangers just don't have it at present.
Yeah, and me and Stevie spoke about this on Wednesday. That it's not just, you look at the transfer window so far, Chris, and I think you could say the decision to spend that money on Hamza Igamani, yes, it might be long term, and you know, we might be having this conversation this time next year about what an exciting player he is. But I think you can question the decision making to spend that money now when you then effectively go into Champions League qualifiers with only one fit striker, and we'll see what happens over the course of the next few weeks while Igaman gets up to speed. But I totally agree with you. There's a lot of work still to be done, and the difficulty is Rangers are the current people who are making transfer decisions are making those decisions against the backdrop of a lot of bad decisions. Money's been spent; it's not been spent very well. Plans have contrasted from seasons from summer to summer, from playing style to playing style. But listen, we spoke about all this before, so we're not going to go into it too much. I think the big thing, it's obviously press conference today, Chris, and the big piece of news that people will be keeping an eye out for is the news about Ridvan Yilmaz. He's a player who's not been able to play that consistently since he came to the club. He went down clutching his thigh. He was stretchered off, which is never a good sign. Again, some noises about potential left backs that Rangers might look to bring in, dependent on the severity of that injury. It's an area where Rangers do have two left backs in Robbie Fraser and Shefty, but that's two left backs one in Shefty who's, he's still 20. I think you've seen in pre-season that defensively he still has a lot of work to do in his game. And Robbie Fraser, who started one or two, I think only one game in his Rangers career. And again, although you've not got a Champions League playoff to play, you do have a few very big games around the corner. So that Ridvan news, especially on the back of the Cortez injury, which although it might not have been associated to load or it was just a bit of a freak injury accident, there's been so many of those that there's not the greatest amount of patience for giving a bit of grace when an injury comes around. That's going to be a big bit of news today from Clermont, depending on how severe that injury to Ridvan Yilmaz is.
It will be. Expected to hear from the manager around about 1:30. I'll be heading up to the training ground just shortly, and as you say, that's going to be the main, not the main topic of conversation, because there's plenty of topics of conversation right now, but it's certainly going to be something that the fans are looking out for. It's always been my fear with Ridvan, as much as he has been impressive in spells when he's played. I've always made the comparison. You look to the right-hand side of the defence and Tav, who can play not at the highest standard. I think that's definitely been the case this season. He definitely looked off it and definitely looked leggy. But for so many seasons, being able to churn out 50, 60 games a season, Rangers need more players like that within this squad. And they need their other full-back. If the right back is going to be able to do it, you need the left back to be able to do it. And that's always been my concern with Ridvan. Is he able to play the number of games? It's fine. It's fine looking good for 5, 6, 7 games. But if you're then injured and you then miss 5, 6, 7 games, it disrupts your flow, disrupts the flow of the side, forces the manager, as we saw last season, square pegs and round holes. Dujon Sterling usually being the square peg. And that's not conducive to a successful side. So I mentioned earlier on, you do need a squad, but you need those squad options to come in and help players out when they perhaps need a rest, not to have to come in every so often when players continually break down. And Ridvan does break down far too often. Even if this one is only a couple of weeks, I think it adds into this narrative of he's injury prone, and people will, even when he then comes back, it'll be a case of, well, how long can we rely on him, because he's going to break down again. It's been a long-standing issue with him almost since he actually signed for the club and he came into the club in the first place. He's never been robust enough, never had that conditioning to be able to go and play the number of games required. And as much as I think we both like him as a player, ultimately, if you're in the training, if you're in the treatment room or you're sitting in the stand, you're no use to Rangers. And that's the case for Ridvan, or the case for so many other players over the last few seasons. So it's an issue that Rangers have to get to the bottom of. If they don't go and sign our left back, which we don't think they will, if Ridvan is a shorter term injury, if they put their faith in him for this season, they have to be sure that he's going to be able to get through the games. Because as you said there, Robbie Fraser, no experience at all, only played a couple of games at first team level. You can't ask him to go and be the first choice left back. Hefty, I think we like going forward in his own half. I think there are questions about his defensive capabilities. And we already have one of them on the other side as well. So I don't think it's not a good situation to be in. You've got a left back who you can't completely trust to be fit, and then two left backs who don't have the experience that you require. So it's not the most pressing issue right now, but it could very soon become one.
Yeah, and then I guess the thing is, if you're out for a couple of weeks, it takes you a couple of weeks to get back up to speed, and you're in that cycle again. And CGM55 saying Clermont will probably just play Sterling at left back tomorrow. I think it might be Shefty, but to the point here, there is obviously a knock-on effect, and this was the difficulty that Rangers in particular faced from March onwards last season. Now, Clermont would say that injuries aren't going to be solved in the injury issue. The conditioning issue, isn't going to be solved just in pre-season alone. But if you take a player like Dujon Sterling, Chris, I thought one of the issues that something that could become an issue with Dujon Sterling is, yes, he can play in all these different positions and look really good. You could. I know he came on at the left wing, and that was a bit of a strange decision. But anywhere on the pitch, he looks pretty comfortable. I think he has played everywhere, bar being a striker for Rangers and a goalkeeper since he came to the club, because he's played at centre back as well in the Old Firm game towards the tail end of last season. But he's a player you need to build around, in my opinion, whether that is at right back, and I thought Tavernier really struggled defensively at points against Dynamo Kyiv, or whether it's in central midfield, where Sterling can see a lot more of the ball and where Rangers don't have numbers at all really at the moment. If you're looking at the team tomorrow, and I'll put up your predicted team, Chris, I don't think I'm going to disagree with it that much. The only hopeful shout I might have is that we see a bit of Danilo from the start, but that's probably a little bit ambitious. But Sterling is someone who, again, you could do with in a number of different positions. He's someone who, again, is starting to build up his fitness, because there's times over the last number of months where he's broken down as well. But there's a knock-on effect of injuries as well. If we look to the starting 11 tomorrow, then Tom Lawrence has started 4 games in a row. Rangers obviously facing St Johnstone in the League Cup. It's a game where I don't know what the attendance is going to be like. I can't imagine the mood will be brilliant after midweek, Chris. The way to lift that is with a few goals, and you're predicting that you'll see McCausland wide left, Cherney wide right. I guess that's in response to the fact that Chefty can't play there because there's probably going to be no Ridvan Yilmaz, and outside of that starting 11, again going into this squad depth discussion, there isn't an abundance of picks for Clermont tomorrow, I guess, to deviate from this.
No, not really. Normally you would get to this type of fixture, especially after a couple of midweeks, and you would say now's a chance to rotate a wee bit, to give some players a chance to maybe try a couple of things out. Rangers can't afford to take any risks tomorrow. It has to be the strongest side. They have to go into this game tomorrow and put in a performance, clearly get a result. Or a negative result would be a disaster and put so much more pressure on them. Everyone at the club, from boardroom to dressing room. So they have to get a result, but the fans that do go tomorrow, they're expecting to see a performance as well. They're looking for something more from this team and from these players. So I don't see it being a case of we'll make a handful of changes and we'll give people a chance and give others a rest. You look at someone like Dessers, who's been asked to play every minute so far. Again, in a normal world, you would say, well, now's your time to put Agaman in or to put Danilo in. The way the manager has been speaking about the two of them, they're not ready to start games yet. Agaman, certainly. Danilo, you would hope, if things are going well, you can maybe get him half an hour tomorrow. But again, as Clermont has outlined, that's very much situation dependent. So I don't see it being Danilo from the start. And on like Tom Lawrence, I think it's probably right to give him a rest, because there's a natural replacement in there, and moving Diomande forward. That allows Dujon Sterling to come in and start and hopefully get some more game time. And as you say, the left back, it's going to be between Fraser and Hefty. I think we have to see a bit more of Hefty at left back. We need to see what he can do defensively. You wouldn't imagine he'll be overly tested defensively, but it'd be interesting to see what he can do when he is asked defensive questions, but also getting forward from that slightly deeper position rather than playing slightly further forward on that left hand side. So I'd be surprised if the team is too far away from that. But I made the point in the analysis piece on Tuesday night. Predicting a Clermont side is very difficult because he clearly reads more into it than others do. He mentioned that post match in terms of the sports science advice and that type of thing. So there's trying to second guess the manager is difficult.
Yeah, and as ever at the moment, I think it's a difficult one to judge fully, because the line, the old sports scientist picking the team, is a line that people love to drag out. But I know Ridvan Yilmaz has went off with an injury the other night, so how much weight this argument holds, I don't know. But if Clermont had put Cherney in and he'd picked up an injury, now I think with hindsight, not starting Cherney was the wrong decision against Dynamo Kyiv, Chris, purely because you take the risk more in the second half that something like that red card or a goal might happen. And by that point, the impact he could have had in the first half, when Rangers did have more of the ball, they did have more impetus in the game, that's kind of lost. But equally, You can't solve an injury crisis, which doesn't stop and press restart in a summer. You can't just solve that by going from the start of the season and predicting people will be where they are not. That's a frustrating thing, I guess, for people watching this August, though, because look, the Rangers squad might still look pretty different in a couple of weeks' time, but the season has obviously started, and tomorrow another must-win game for Rangers as they try to lift the mood a little bit. Let's get to a few comments, nice contrasting comments as ever in the comment section. You will not be surprised to hear Chris Scott Kearney saying, "Wish people would calm down. We're still in August." And Blue Nose John saying that Clement has to go. You can't get away with 7 wins in 23 games. AJ saying Lawrence is burnt out already. Chris, Alex Lowry scored a really good goal the other night. It just feels like it might not happen for him, doesn't it? Because he was involved in pre-season. We've not seen him since pre-season. And look, Lowry, it was about 2, I think going on 3 years ago where he first made that impact in the Rangers first team. Young players obviously have their own responsibility for making it into the first team. It is on them more than any other manager. I think Lowry at times is a player who doesn't work hard enough off the ball for his quality on it. However, again, if you look at him, if you look at Leon King, the lack of continuity, whether it be from a head of academy or a first team manager or a playing style, all these things that you probably need as a player to break into the first team aren't there as well. And it just hasn't, nothing's really lined up for Lowry since he came on and scored against Stirling Albion a few years ago. And it looks like at the moment he's not in Clement's plans purely because that number 10 position is so light on options, and we've not seen him at all really since pre-season.
Stevie spoke about him on the show yesterday. He was at the B team game the other night. I did see the highlights from it. The goal that he cuts in from that left hand side and finds the top corner. That's a moment of real quality. You don't. That's not a fluke. That's something that we've seen Alec Lowry do throughout his career, but do it at a certain level, and it's fine doing it against Clyde in a game like that. It's a very different proposition going into Rangers first team when there is thousands of people watching and there is expectation and there is demand to win the game. And when he's been put in those positions too often, he's not made the most of them. And as you say there, you look at the options at number 10, you would have to think that because he's not been given a chance by now, it shows that the manager clearly doesn't rate him, whether that's a quality issue, whether that's what he does on the ball, what he does off the ball, whether it's attitude, whether it's something else. He clearly doesn't fancy Alec Lowry as the answer. And it's a shame because he was spoken about so often when he was coming through the youth ranks. It was always a case of, there's this boy coming through, Lowry, watch him, he's going to be one, he'll be the Rangers number 10, he'll be Rangers this, that, and the next thing. And it's not quite happening for him. The same has to be said of Leon King. A lot of talk about him during his youth career. People were really excited. He then got himself into that first team squad. Clearly had some difficult times under Gio. Played more often than would have been ideal for a player in his situation. Hasn't kicked on. Is still part of the squad, but doesn't look like ever cementing himself as a Rangers starter. And it's a shame because we did think that both of these boys could be stars for Rangers and stars for Scotland going forward. If they are to move on this summer, which I think is probably the best thing for them, I hope they go play regularly and go and show people what they can do. But you do get the feeling that both of their Rangers careers, they've drifted, they've gone on too long, they've not kicked on at the right moments. And it would be a surprise if both of them now become important parts of this squad, because it looks like other players are ahead of them at present, and if more players were to come in, they would then fall down that pecking order. So I would be surprised if we see too much faith being put in both those guys, and also be surprised if they're both still here come the first week in September.
And they're also at that stage where they're not really young players anymore, are we? We have a real habit of players being young players in Scotland until they're kind of 23, 24, but you're right in terms of the games that they've played. Diomande's obviously 22 and has played nearly 200 games, I think, in his career. Another point, Chris, obviously, as we start to come to a close, I thought that if you watch the game the first half against Motherwell and you watch the game against Dynamo Kyiv the first half, Rangers were better on Saturday against Motherwell, obviously playing a team that's not as good, not in the Champions League qualifiers. But for me, the biggest difference was when you take out the individual quality of someone like Tierney, how big the gap was, not just in one position, but how he improved players across the entirety of the front four. Now, that's not to put too much weight on his performance, because he'll have bad games, he'll have weaknesses to his game as well. I just think, as we've referenced this week, the way that Clermont's team plays, especially in the final third, because the players are farther apart, sometimes it's more about what they do individually to get the ball into the final third. You'd expect him to play tomorrow, but there is a lot of weight on his shoulders already, Chris. And I thought you saw that when he came off the bench in midweek against Kyiv, where again, supporters have only seen him for a matter of minutes, maybe 90 minutes overall. But already they've seen enough to think that he is going to markedly improve the front line, which, to be fair, he did in that Motherwell game. But again, we go back to the start of saying which area of that team, if I pull it back up at the moment, and I know that's not the whole squad depth, but which area of that team, that starting 11, needs improvement. And you could argue a number of positions. Rangers need depth in midfield, although Barron and Diomande certainly are two players who you think they're fine at the moment, but Conor Barron, I think in particular, needs a bit of a rotation option in there. You need some experience in the centre of that midfield. I think there's a strong argument that Rangers still need another centre-half to play alongside Robin Proper. We've spoken about the full-back issues. That front four area, though, Chris, especially number 10, that's the area that I have my eye on most over the next couple of weeks, because at the moment it's not good enough, and that's been shown by the impact that Tierney's been able to have, even when he's not been coming into games at his full peak fitness.
Mm-hmm. I think a point is maybe lost on Tuesday night about Tierney. The manager actually said post-match that he was advised he cannot start, and he was only able to get through a set number of minutes. Mm-hmm. If the game had gone to extra time, I'm assuming Tierney would have stayed on the pitch and then plays the extra half hour. So if he was able to get through that half hour plus the minutes that he played, why not start him and then take him off after an hour if he's absolutely run his race and he's done? Putting him on at that time put so much pressure on him. It was basically saying, son, go and try and win us the game, because this isn't going very well. And that it was unfair on him. Now, of course, it didn't work in events and he went away from Rangers on the night, but you do think if he had to start, he was the better option on that right hand side. When the forward four is light on options and is light on quality as it is, you need your best players on the pitch. Tierney, I think we all agree, is the right option off that right hand side. The left hand side is an issue. Now, the manager mentioned Abdallah Sima again a couple of weeks ago and hinted that one's perhaps not done. I think they do need another option on the left, but as you mentioned there, number 10, it's crying out for huge improvement. It's not just a case of they need a starter. They need a starter and a reliable backup, and depending how many leave, maybe even another one after that. Will Rangers sign 3 number 10s in the next 14 days? I'd be
surprised based on the summer so far.
I would be pleased, but I would also be surprised. But that number 10 area, if the manager's going to persist with this system, which we think he will, there's nothing to suggest that he won't. It has to have an upgrade in it. The options that are there have not delivered often enough. The fans have no faith that they will deliver going forward. Rangers do need to improve that area. If they don't, no matter what work is done elsewhere, now they could go and get another number 9 in. They could sign Seam on the left hand side, bring in another centre half. They could provide a bit of cover in the middle of the pitch. If the number 10 isn't, if all that work is done, but the number 10 is not improved, Rangers aren't winning anything this season. That's how important that position is for Rangers. They have to get that right. And so the next 14 days and however many hours will determine if that work has been done.
Absolutely right. We're going to leave it there. We'll be live for the YouTube members about 3:30 after the press conference to bring you a brief 15-minute summary of what Clermont had to say, especially on that topic of Ridvan Yilmaz as well. That video will be live to everyone on YouTube slightly later, about 6 o'clock this evening. But until then, thank you for joining us. We'll speak to you tomorrow from Hampden. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and bye for now.